This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back. So tonight I'm joined by a CEO of a big trust up in Shropshire. Her name is Carla Whelan, and she is the CEO of the Empower Trust. And tonight our topic is going to be all things election. So with an election now on the horizon on the 4th of July, we know that there'll be an opportunity for some educational reform and some fairly large-scale changes to take place. And it's important that as educators, we kind of give ourselves enough thinking time to think about what are the priorities that we would like an incoming government to have around education, so that we can, when they start to campaign and talk about their manifestos around the issue of education, we're well placed to make a decision on what we believe is best for the future of education in our country. And there are massive challenges to that. One of them, not least, is that when we're thinking about developing education in this country, it's a long-term vision. So from where we are at the moment to where we'd all like it to get to, and all the improvements that we'd like to see within the education sector in this country, we need a really long-term vision for that. And often when people talk about their visions for what they'd like education to become, they're talking about an entire generation of pupils. So if you take that from entering nursery until kind of leaving further education at university, you're looking there at something like 17 or 18 years. So that's a really, really long time for us to kind of wait to see any kind of large scale impact. So what's really important about that is that it's significantly longer than the 4-year term of an election cycle, which is often what the governments are working towards. They're obviously looking to have policies that will get them elected in this election cycle, and then looking to make changes that are going to mean that they stay in power when we come around to the next election cycle. So that's one really fundamental challenge when we're thinking about how to improve education and what we should be looking for from an incoming government. What we want is really long-term visionary thinking. But the nature of our electoral system is such that often what we end up with is much smaller scale, short-term thinking. And often that can result in some policies that are perhaps, shall we say, less well thought through than others. And that's often what we find ourselves dealing with. So absolutely, I think one thing that everybody would agree on is that an incoming government needs to look longer term than just the next election itself, and trying to make sure that they have a longer term vision for education in the country. Another thing that we need to be thinking about is that there seems to be a growing impetus on schools to become competitive with one another, and a lot of that is fueled by the political climate as well. The fact that league tables and results are shared publicly, and whether that's your Progress 8 score within a secondary school or your combined score within primary SATs. Whatever it is, whatever your context is, your accountability measures are shared publicly and shared widely, and they're there for all to see. And what that ends up driving is competition. And that's not necessarily a bad thing if it's something that's going to drive standards. But what we don't want is for schools to be doing each other down in a way that just to kind of benefit themselves in the longer term. We need to be making sure that schools are happy and willing to share what they've got to share, their expertise, and whether that's internal expertise from particular members of staff, or whether that's expertise that exists in what they can offer to others on the outside as well. It's important that we have an education climate that values collaboration, much more than it values competition. And at the moment, we seem to be kind of heading down a route where schools are becoming more competitive with each other. That's particularly true with trusts. And when I was talking to Carla before our session tonight, it was one thing that we spoke about quite a lot, was the fact that often trusts are looking at trying to develop themselves, but also to build their trusts. So they're looking at recruiting other schools, and often what that can mean is that they're going out quite aggressively and trying to recruit other schools in, and at the detriment of others. And often what that will mean is that if trusts have got talent and have got people that want to get out and about and share their expertise, sometimes they can be reluctant to do that within their immediate local area, because by encouraging them to get out and by improving other trusts in the local area, they're actually ending up potentially affecting the clientele that they're able to attract into their trust. By making another trust more attractive, it can end up meaning that they drive pupils away from their own. So again, it's another part of the puzzle which seems to be lending itself at the moment towards competition over collaboration. And certainly something that an incoming government should be looking at is what they can do to kind of fix that and to reverse it, put it back the other way. Can we come up with a system that values collaboration more than it values individual achievement? Because at the moment, that's certainly something that perhaps we're lacking. However, with all of this, it kind of paints a bit of a negative picture, I suppose, and that's not what we want to do. That's not at all the case. The purpose that we have in our job day to day is something that is the envy of other people in other jobs and other professions, and that still absolutely is true now as it's ever been. And I think even when we have these times of change and times of uncertainty, which no doubt we've currently got at the moment, and when we're going to talk about a lot of the challenges later on with Carla around funding and budgets and all of the other pressures from Ofsted and high accountability measures. All of those factors are on the shoulders of schools all of the time, but that doesn't diminish the sheer joy and magic that comes from working in a school and having that purpose and meaning to your day every single day. I used to be a tennis coach before I was a teacher. And I used to coach somebody who was the managing director of Goldman Sachs, and so obviously he was a multimillionaire and very, very good at what he did. But I always remember having conversations with him over the net about purpose and meaning, and he would say to me that look, I've got millions of pounds there, but it's a bit of a trap. Firstly, because as my income has increased, so too has my lifestyle. My lifestyle has improved to match that, and I'm now at the point where I've got to maintain the income. Otherwise the lifestyle drops, and I'm not prepared for that to happen because I've lived to this lifestyle, to this standard for as long as I have. So he kind of felt a little bit trapped. And he said, the other thing that you've got to remember, Adam, as well, is that I've got no purpose to what I do. What I do is all about making money ultimately for somebody else. And I get a cut of that and I do very well out of it, but I've got no purpose. I've got no meaning to the actual work that I do. And he used to say to me, you've got that every single day. And that's something that really stayed with me and I think always will all the way through my teaching career. It's really important to hold on to that when you go into work each day, you're doing something that matters and you're doing something that really does make a difference. And what that also means is that all of this debate and thinking around, right, how do we improve the education sector for everyone going forward? How do we make sure that we do have a long-term vision for what that improvement looks like and how we're going to do that and what we want to see for our children and young people? However difficult it becomes, those debates and that thinking is always really, really important, always worthwhile doing, because what we do really, really matters. And it is difficult when we're in the sort of day-to-day throes of, report writing and class assembly preparation and all of the other things that we do that surround us when we're in schools. And that's not even talking about the lessons that we're teaching as well. It's really easy to kind of get into that bubble, but it's equally important to kind of take that step back and think, however difficult things feel in our own individual context and in the wider national context, it's really important to hold on to that purpose and that meaning that we've all got every single day in our working lives, because that honestly is the envy of lots of people. The other thing that I think is really important to think about as well is where that kind of positivity needs to start from. So quite often we look above us to kind of spark that positivity. And I know that that's definitely, talking to people that I work with and people around my professional circles. I know that everybody's kind of looking to the next government, whether it's Conservative, Labour, or somebody else, to kind of spark that thread of positivity for the education sector more widely. But I'm not sure that's the role, and I'm not sure that's realistic either. I think that the important thing for us as educators to think about, and particularly as school leaders, is to think, how do we spark that positivity within our own sector? Because if we can spark that as leaders, that will then filter down into the staff that work in our schools, and that will filter down to the children that come and work, that come to work and learn in our schools as well. So I think it's really important to think about what we can do practically to spark that positivity. So yes, budgets are incredibly tight, and it's becoming harder and harder to equip our schools with the resources that we need to deliver the absolute best. But what that also gives is an opportunity for ingenuity and an opportunity to adapt and improve in that context. So I'll give you an example. With the declining amount of support staff that are available in schools, it's putting a greater emphasis on the importance of developing really high quality adaptive expertise and responsive teaching. And yes, okay, there's a threat there in that, nobody likes to see less support. We'd all like to have more support in school, but there's also an opportunity there, because if out of necessity we have to develop adaptive expertise and better responsive teaching approaches in our classrooms, then we're going to end up as better teachers as a result. And that in itself presents us with an opportunity. There's lots of research that's been done around that kind of well-being space and job satisfaction space recently, but it's also there's research that goes back much further than the last sort of 5 or 6 years on that. You've got people like Herzberg who were researching in the 80s around this idea of job satisfaction. And I come back to that thing, which is what he found as well, which is that meaning and purpose are the two things that have the greatest impact on job satisfaction. So one of the biggest drivers for meaning and purpose is getting better at what you do. If you feel like you're improving as a teacher, you're going to feel like you have a greater purpose within the classroom that you work in. You're going to feel like you have more, that your job has more meaning because you have a wider impact. So by developing teaching and making sure that we have expertise that is more adaptive and is more responsive, we can very, very quickly get to a point where people feel better about the job that they're doing. They feel more positive about the role that they're playing in their young people's lives. And off the back of that, again, that's the thing that sparks the positivity that then hopefully filters out and bleeds into our entire sector. That would be my hope anyway. But I think it is really important to kind of think about whose responsibility is it to spark that positivity. And yes, we'd love to see that coming from government as well. But even if it doesn't come from government, even if we do continue to get policies that are hitting schools hard in terms of budgets and resources, it's really important to hold on to our responsibility to the young people to spark a positive environment in the environments that we work in as well. So I think holding on to the joy of that profession that we've got and the meaning and purpose that we take from that should hopefully help all of us kind of maintain that positivity as much as we possibly can. Before I bring Carla into the conversation, we're going to go to some adverts and hear some messages from our friends and partners.
Empowering education with Easy for You, where innovation meets accessibility. Our subscription-based offering not only equips schools with cutting-edge devices, but revolutionizes the learning experience by eliminating financial barriers, streamlining support, and embracing technology. We're not just providing tools, we're shaping a future where every student can thrive, unburdened by limitations. Easy for You, transforming education, one device at a time. Find out more at www.easyforyou.school.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Reading Solutions UK. Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Join the free online International Reading Conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui, beloved children's author Michael Rosen, fluency expert Tim Rosinski, EEF specialist Chloe Butlin, the National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton, and a range of experienced practitioners, including MAT leaders, deputy heads, heads of English, high-level teaching assistants, and school librarians. Through the 3-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Visit Reading Solutions at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk for more information and to sign up for this free conference.
Okay, hello and welcome back. So I have promised you Carla Whelan, the CEO of Empower Trust, and I promise I will deliver on that. But unfortunately, she has just sent me a message to say that she's held up in some traffic. She was made promises about Wi-Fi that frankly haven't been kept, and so she's a little bit delayed. But Carla is going to join us as soon as she can. She thinks that probably in about 25 minutes or so. So I'm going to be going solo for the next 25 minutes or so while we wait for Carla, and I'll try to do some justice to some of the things that we spoke about earlier on today when I met her and kind of planned our talk out. So we finished that last section talking about the need to spark positivity and the need to be, as school leaders and people that work in schools, having that responsibility of being the people that really spark that positivity. That is really, really hard to do. And it's hard to do for a number of reasons. And a lot of that is to do with the climate that we're currently working in. One of the things that's most difficult about that climate is the retention crisis that we're currently facing. So, and note the really important bit that I'm talking about there is the retention crisis rather than the recruitment crisis. I think that there's an awful lot of emphasis on recruitment at the moment. How do we get new people into teaching? How do we get people to want to give teaching a go? There are so many different routes into teaching now, far more than what I could list off the top of my head right now. But what's really important is once we get them in, how do we keep them there? And there's a number of things that Carla and I spoke about earlier that we think are really important considerations for an incoming government to take when they're trying to fix that retention crisis. So let's frame it in a bit of a context first. So within the developed world, the UK currently has the youngest teaching population. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean by age. So I'm not saying that the average age of a UK teacher is younger than any other country in the developed world. I'm not sure actually on that statistic. But what we do know is that the number of years in service for the average teacher in the UK is lower than the number of years in service for the average teacher in other countries around the developed world. Now, the reason for that is clear. Teachers come into the profession, they build up expertise, they build up knowledge, and then they leave it. And they take with them all of that expertise and all of that knowledge. And there are lots and lots of reasons for that. And, you know, I think over the last 5 or 6 years, there's definitely been a big push around improving, having a greater focus, on well-being and improving work-life balance, because we all know what a demanding job physically and in terms of the number of hours teaching can be. So that is absolutely right that we've had that focus in that area. But I'm going to go back to that study I mentioned earlier from 1984, which was by Frederick Herzberg, and he found that the factors that affect job satisfaction are not the same factors that affect job dissatisfaction. So I'll clarify that a little bit. So job dissatisfaction, as he found, was something that was affected by more material things. So he classed those as hygiene factors. So it would be things like a duvet day. So, okay, I give everybody a duvet day once a term. That is going to make them less dissatisfied with their job, but crucially not more satisfied with it. It's a bit of a tricky way that he saw it, but if you can stay with it, it does make more sense, I promise. So you've got all of those kind of material things, so your Christmas shopping days, your PPA from home, and all of that kind of stuff, which tends to make people less dissatisfied with their job. And that's really, really important. But I do feel that that's where a lot of our focus has been. But what Herzberg found was that job satisfaction is much more closely linked to the meaning and the purpose that you take from your job. So what is it that actually affects meaning and purpose? Now, there are lots and lots of things, and to a large extent, it's kind of unique to different people. But if we were going to try and put an umbrella term, which I think most teachers would relate to as being something that definitely affects the amount of purpose that they feel they take from their job and the amount of meaning they take from it, I think agency would be a really, really useful term to use. And that's something that at the moment on EduTwitter is getting a lot of traction, a lot of people talking about agency and how do we protect teacher agency, particularly with models of instructional coaching that can be seen. And I think it's important to point out that it's a mistake to see them in this way. It's not the intention of the creators, but some models of instructional coaching can be seen as very much focused on strategy. So it's a case of me coming into your classroom and going, right, okay, I want you to work on cold call. So every time you ask a question, I want you to cold call it. And here's an example of how you do that. You have a go. I'm going to come back in a couple of weeks and see how you're getting on with that. And that kind of shift towards people having a far more kind of strategy, quick win approach to developing teaching seems to kind of be the thing that sucks the agency out of it. When we take that kind of approach, what we end up doing is taking the thinking out of teaching. And the thinking is where you get the meaning and the purpose. And frankly, that's where you get the joy from within the job as well. So it seems to be a reality at the moment that that's often what is going on in schools. And certainly the schools that I work with and the school leaders that I talk to and the teachers that I talk to, they're quite preoccupied with making sure that the mandated strategy, whatever that is the thing that they're actually using in their classroom. So, I was with a school not long ago and, being shown around by the head teacher, and the head teacher said, we are a cold calling school. So, what does that mean? As well, every teacher, every class, cold calling, you'll see it. And sure enough, as we were walking around, every single classroom we went into, every single question that was asked, cold calling was the thing that was used. Now, you cannot possibly tell me that cold calling is the right approach to every single question that you want to ask. There was no use of show me boards. There was very little think, pair, share. There was a little bit that I saw, but really not very much at all. There was no kind of combination of strategies. So there was no kind of, okay, I'm going to pose this question. I'm going to give you the thinking time. Then I'm going to give you that think, pair, share time. Then I'm going to cold call a response. There was none of that. It was just question straight to cold call. There was no one using all hands up, which if anyone follows Pritesh Raichura on X, you'll have no doubt seen his video of using that strategy absolutely beautifully. It was just very, very much very one-dimensional, and I think that's a natural thing for people to do if you've got a really young workforce in terms of experience. And why is that? Because when you've got such a young workforce, you've got less developed mental models of what great teaching is. So if we take that back a step, if we've got teachers a teacher that's perhaps been in the job for 4 years, 5 years perhaps, well, all kind of lots and lots of research around expertise, whether you kind of subscribe to it or not, whether you kind of agree and buy into this idea that it takes 10 years or 10,000 hours to become expert at something, that's kind of by the by. What's important is that everybody would accept that to become expert at something takes a lot of practice, a lot of effortful practice, a lot of deliberate practice over a really long period of time. If you're 4, 5, 6 years into your career and you're being asked to coach or develop another teacher, have you got the expertise that would be required to have a mental model that is agile enough and a mental model that you've got enough control and understanding of yourself to be able to unpack that, work out what the person that you're coaching, what their mental model is, and work out how to get your mental model and their mental model to meet in such a way as to get them to buy into what it is that you think they should be improving about their teaching. I'd propose that it's pretty unlikely that you would be able to do that. So I think the two things kind of feed into each other. We've got this really inexperienced workforce, and that doesn't mean bad, it just means inexperienced. That then means that the people that are coaching and mentoring and developing the young teachers and the new teachers that are coming into the profession, they themselves have got underdeveloped mental models of what good teaching is, and we're asking those people to go and develop others. And so it's natural that their default position will become, I'm going to get you to use a strategy, because a strategy is something that's concrete, it's something I can understand, it's something I can see, it's something I can model to you, something I can go and check whether you're doing it. It's something really concrete that we can hang our hat on and see whether we've got success. But what that does is it avoids the need for that teacher to be ever really having to engage with thinking about what really high quality teaching is, and thinking about how high quality teaching, what the different interactions are, and what the different decision making elements that you have within really high quality teaching, within the best teaching. And so that in itself reduces the agency of the teacher. The teacher ends up with a kind of a checklist of strategies that they need to deploy, and their job is to go out and deliver those strategies. And so often I speak to teachers who are going, well, I did this thing that I'm supposed to be doing, but it doesn't really seem to be working. But what's most worrying about that is they don't see it as their job to work out why. A really good example of that, retrieval practice. So I was with a school not long ago that has a really clear policy around retrieval practice. So they want every lesson to start with retrieval practice quiz, and it's got to be 4 questions. And every single lesson, bar none, starts with that retrieval practice quiz. And they've even got like a really clear policy for how teachers come up with the questions that they're asking there. So, really prescriptive in that sense. And I was talking to one teacher who was saying that they just aren't seeing any gains from that retrieval practice. It just doesn't feel like it's having any impact. But what this teacher didn't do was then think, or what they didn't have was any ideas of what they would rather do differently, or how they could tweak it or change it to make it more effective. Because in their minds, that's not their job. Their job is to go into the classroom and deliver the mandated strategies and the mandated approaches to teaching different subjects that have been given to them by leaders. And complete removal of any kind of agency. And we've got to put that back. If we're going to do anything to help the retention crisis in this country, we've got to put that agency back. So what is it that's stopping us from doing that? As we said earlier, I think it's probably to a large extent down to the fact that we've got a fairly inexperienced workforce. We need to keep our more experienced teachers in the game for much longer, so that they can pass down that expertise, and they can make sure that they pass down those mental models, so that those that are then receiving that are developing the ability to think with those mental models, rather than just recreate and push out these mandated strategies. So it's really important that we kind of move towards a model of coaching and developing of teachers that enables them to do the thinking rather than just pushing out these strategies, as I say. So how do we do that? How do we make sure that we keep these teachers in the game for longer? Yes, there is, as I say, there's this thing around agency and the importance of making sure that we give agency to people so that their motivations to remain in the job are higher, because they've got that job satisfaction around the meaning and purpose. But it's also got to be about money as well, because so often we are incentivized to move on our experienced teachers. There was a conversation some years ago now that I remember having with a head teacher, and I'd just gone into senior leadership, and we just had the resignation of a teacher, an experienced teacher. And I told her that we've just had so-and-so's resignation. And their response was, oh, great, she's UPS 2. And for that to be the initial reaction, that actually that's a fantastic thing, because we're moving on somebody who's quite expensive. For the budget to be the thing that is driving whether something is a good thing or a bad thing in a school is a really sorry state of affairs. And there has to be a focus for an incoming government on how do we make sure that we provide schools with enough money that every school can have some experienced teachers, that we're not incentivizing schools to fill themselves with ECTs so that they can survive, so that they can balance their budgets. How do we incentivize schools to actually value the contributions and the expertise of more experienced teachers? how do we do that as a system as well? Because frankly, if you're an experienced teacher, let's say you're on like UPS 1 and you want to move on, it's really, really difficult to see where you go at that point. If you don't want to go into senior leadership, how do you go and get a job as a year group leader or as a class teacher when you're on UPS 1? Because again, the system incentivizes the schools to give the jobs to the people who are cheapest, because there is such a crisis around school budgets. So any incoming government must deal with that. They must look at the fact that we've currently got a financial situation that is incentivizing schools to recruit less experienced teachers and to move on their more experienced teachers. And the fact that that is feeding in to the problem that I spoke about earlier around so many of our teachers who are responsible for developing others having underdeveloped mental models themselves because they don't have the experience of teaching over a long enough period of time. So you've got this circle that's just continually repeating itself and won't change until we kind of tackle all of those aspects at the same time. We've got to have a system that promotes agency for teachers. We've got to value professional development enough that we get really good at it and we understand how to use agency properly within our coaching, mentoring, and professional development. And we've got to fund schools properly so that they can afford to keep their more experienced teachers and afford to give them the roles that their experience deserves. If you go onto the Teachers Talk Radio website and you look at my profile, my education hero is a lady called Lorna Weir. Now, Lorna works in the school that I currently work in. She's been teaching for quite a number of years. I won't say how many, because that's not for me to say, but it's very much for her to say. But she's a very experienced teacher, and she turns up day in, day out and delivers absolute first-class learning first-class teaching, to every single child that has the privilege of being in her class. And it's people like Lorna that should be seen as the absolute pinnacle of our career. But unfortunately, it's those experienced teachers, as I say, that are being incentivized to either move on or to move out of the profession within the current system. And nobody wants that. Nobody wants to lose our experienced teachers. But we've got a system that means that at the moment, we're incentivizing schools to give jobs to the least experienced. And as I say, the problems with that are vast. The next thing that we wanted to talk about was something really big. It was Ofsted. And I think I'm going to leave that one to when Carla does join us, just because I don't want to steal any of her thunder. She's got some really interesting ideas on how an incoming government could reform the inspectorate and make it something that is more developmental rather than something that is sort of really geared towards judgment alone at this stage. So I won't go into that too much now. I'll leave that for when Carla is able to join us. Another thing that we spoke about, another thing that should absolutely be a priority of the incoming government, is this idea of funding schools so that they can bring the communities together. So during COVID, schools became kind of the hub of the community. They were, apart from anything else, they were one of very few places that were open. But schools were places where people could rely on. So schools, teachers and leaders were constantly being asked about all the different systems and schemes that the government was bringing out and the rules and can I do this and can I do that. And so schools really became like a safe haven for people that were struggling with mental health, or that their children were struggling with mental health. They could go to schools, and even if they weren't a key worker, schools were welcoming those children in, because it is absolutely our job to look after the mental health of every child that comes into our community, and indeed beyond that as well. So one of the most fantastic things about the pandemic, and there weren't many, but this was one of them, is that schools did begin to be seen as the hub of a community, which is always how they were when I was growing up. I remember the kind of PTA, Parent Teacher Association, run events at my primary school. I remember my mum and my dad being a part of that PTA and going along to summer fairs and Easter fairs and Christmas fairs and shows and all of this kind of thing. And it would be the whole community coming together. And not only would it be the school community, but it would also be the local community. So the Old People's Home would bring people over to sit and enjoy music shows and things like that. And we'd have like the local scout team come over and perform things and do things at all of these events as well. So it always was in the past, the way that schools were the kind of hub of communities, and that was definitely something that that COVID reminded us of and brought us back to, because schools did then take up that position of being at the hub of the community again. And so it's really important that we get back to that. It was definitely something that was a big success, and sadly we've lost it since. And I know that a lot of school leaders report a greater disengagement of parents with schools since the pandemic has finished. And I wonder if, in part, some of that is a really missed opportunity. We kind of connected with parents in the community during the pandemic, and now we seem to have kind of disconnected again. So thinking about things that an incoming government could prioritise around that is, let's think about parenting classes, for example. Can we put enough funding there so that we can put parenting classes on for parents of children within our schools? Now, okay, you can access that through local authorities at the moment as well. I know that, but it feels strange that you've kind of got those two places. You kind of got those two places that are disconnected in that sense. So you've got schools who are kind of the hub of the community. That's where everybody's going every day. It's where the children are being dropped off and the parents are collecting from. But then you've also got this services, sort of parenting class service that's happening over here somewhere separate. It just feels disconnected, and it's strange that we've got that when really if schools are going to be the hub of our communities, why can't we have that kind of service running from schools? The schools are the ones that have got the relationships with the parents, and they're going to be more likely to get them to engage with that kind of external agency support. So certainly we think that an incoming government should look at something like that and really funding those kinds of services so that schools can connect different aspects of the community together in a way that benefits everybody. Schools being at the heart of the community is absolutely something that an incoming government should be looking at and shouldn't neglect it, because it's just too big an opportunity for it to turn away. However, it's going to cost money, and I know a lot of this will come back to money. But when it comes back to money, you've got to think that there are no solutions to anything. There are only trade-offs, and it has to be worth looking at what we can trade off so that we can have that kind of greater community spirit in all of our communities led by schools. If we can make schools those hubs, it's got to be worth looking at whether we can find a way of trading something off against that to ensure that we've got the best situation for all of our communities and all of the children that exist in them. So, rather excitingly, we do now have, I believe, Carla on the line. Carla, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Adam. Can you hear me?
Perfectly, loud and clear, no Wi-Fi problems. You've done it. You told me 6:40, it's 6:37, and you're in ahead of time.
Yeah, I hope there's no police, but I put my foot down.
All that for Teachers Talk Radio. Goodness me, thank you so much. Carla, I've kind of had a bit of a go at running through the first couple of the things that we spoke about earlier today when we had our call to kind of plan this show. Talked a little bit about the retention crisis and the need to prioritise teacher agency, but also the need to fund that so that we can make sure that we keep those experienced teachers in the profession so that they can sort of bleed that experience down into the rest of the profession. Is there anything that you want to kind of add or jump in on that?
No, I think obviously there's a huge national recruitment and retention issue at the moment in teaching. And I think that one of the things we discussed earlier is also the obligation that we've got as a profession, I think, to think positively about our profession. There's nothing, I think, that's more great than being in the classroom and being a part of education. I think it's exciting. But I think that we don't necessarily sell that ourselves. And so I think that part of the next steps, I think, in education need to be that we as a profession take hold of that and share the positives of it and really embrace what we're doing in the classroom, and as well as leaders then also embracing the fact that we need to really, really focus down on workload and making it a fun profession where we can enjoy being in the classroom again.
Yeah, love that. Absolutely love that. And it really concurs with what I was saying before you joined as well. What are your views on agency? It's something that I've done quite a lot of thinking about lately. And I personally feel that by giving teachers greater agency, we will engage them more with the purpose and meaning that is just the most wonderful thing about this job. And if we can give them that agency and therefore that purpose and meaning, we're therefore likely to keep them in the job longer. Do you have any thoughts on that at all?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we discussed earlier, didn't we, the NFER 2020 report that states about teachers feeling that autonomy in their classrooms, autonomy in decision making is one of the key areas around retention and recruitment, and that not necessarily feeling like they have that within their schools or within the profession full stop. And sometimes in the past it has felt like that. It's felt like there's been government initiated or
Oh, are you still there, Carla? I think we might have lost Carla just for the moment, but hopefully she'll rejoin us in a second. She was just talking there about government mandated schemes and approaches that we've had in the past that have really kind of hit that kind of agency. And just while Carla reconnects, I'm going to just share a memory that I've got from my very, very early teaching career. It was I just caught right at the very, very back end of the National Literacy Hour. And for the majority of teachers now, because as we said earlier, we've got one of the youngest teaching workforces in the world. For those of you that weren't teaching at that time, you literally had a coloured clock that was delivered to you that showed you how many minutes you needed to do each part of this literacy hour for. Oh, Carla's back. Do you remember that, Carla?
Yeah, I remember that. Absolutely. I absolutely timed myself doing my 15-minute of text level, and when we look back, it's quite ridiculous. However,
Carla's just dipped out there again, and it gives me an opportunity to kind of go back a little bit again and kind of on that point around the literacy hour and other things as well at the time. So I remember being a really young inexperienced teacher and kind of coming into it and just wanting to do a good job, right? That's what everyone wants to do. And for me, doing a good job was doing all of these things that we were supposed to be doing, all of these initiatives, all of this stuff that was kind of mandated from above, whether it was the National Literacy Hour, whether it was something completely different. It was all about making sure that we did that I was doing all of the things that I was supposed to be doing. And I remember I just couldn't do it all because, frankly, it was just not possible. And I remember getting probably about 3/4 of the way through my NQT year, and I remember I had a partner teacher. So I was in year 3. The year 4 teacher was a lady called Lynn Hutchins. If Lynn is ever listening to this, Lynn, you saved me, because I remember going to Lynn and going, Lynn, I've got to tell you something. That some of this stuff that we're supposed to be doing, like I just haven't done it. I just can't fit it in. I just can't do it. And
do I keep dropping out, Adam?
Oh, you're back, Carla. Yes, yeah, fantastic.
Do I keep dropping out? Do I? Apologies. I'm rambling on, and I'm thinking that everyone's listening. But
no worries. I was rambling as well, so that's no problem. I'll finish this story if that's okay. Just about
fine, no problem.
Lynn, who I worked with when I was in my NQT year, and I was saying to her, Lynn, I can't fit this stuff in. I just can't do it. And she turned to me and she went, Adam, neither am I. And it was just this moment of like complete realization that I wasn't on my own, and that someone else was finding this struggle as well to kind of do all of these mandated things that were on this sort of checklist that was apparently going to make me a good teacher if I was doing all of these things. And we just sort of sat in sort of complete relaxation. And then after a while, I just kind of confessed that actually I wasn't doing any of these things that I was supposed to be doing. And over the next sort of week or so, we kind of went round and spoke to some other people, some other teachers, and lo and behold, we found that none of us were doing these things. And it was just a weird time in education, because it was this time when we just had all of these, as I say, these mandated things that we had to do that were completely divorced from context, either the context that we were teaching in at the time within our schools or our own personal contexts. And that really was a time where there was just no agency whatsoever. And I know that the profession has been pushing for more of it, absolutely. But we've got to facilitate that agency by keeping the more experienced teachers in the profession for longer, so that those more experienced teachers' mental models can bleed down into the less experienced teachers, and then they will feel more in control to make the choices that are really and truly theirs within their classrooms. Carla, do you want to come back in there? Well, I think Carla Carla may have dropped out again there on that one, so that's okay. What it does do is give me a moment just to pause and take us to the news. Now, when we come back from the news, hopefully we'll have a more stabilised connection from Carla, and we'll be able to delve into some of the detail about some ideas that she's got for the incoming government.
Empowering education with Easy for You, where innovation meets accessibility. Our subscription-based offering not only equips schools with cutting-edge devices, but revolutionises the learning experience by eliminating financial barriers, streamlining support, and embracing technology. We're not just providing tools, we're shaping a future where every student can thrive, unburdened by limitations. Easy for You, transforming education, one device at a time. Find out more at www.easyforyou.school.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Reading Solutions UK. Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Join the free online International Reading Conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui, beloved children's author Michael Rosen, fluency expert Tim Rosinski, EEF specialist Chloe Butlin, the National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton, and a range of experienced practitioners, including MAT leaders, deputy heads, heads of English, high-level teaching assistants, and school librarians. Through the 3-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Visit Reading Solutions at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk for more information and to sign up for this free conference.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
With the general election approaching, some political parties have already turned their attention to education. All major media outlets have covered Labour's plans to add VAT to private school fees and the Conservatives' comments on increasing apprenticeships by getting rid of rip-off degrees. However, the BBC features a story on proposals by the Lib Dems to increase taxes on social media giants, as well as companies such as Amazon and Google. The revenue raised, the party says, would then be used to fund mental health professionals for all England state schools. The tax itself already exists and is known as the Digital Services Tax, but the Liberal Democrats say they would triple the amount the companies paid in it. Recent NHS statistics reported by the BBC show nearly 340,000 children and young people are currently on waiting lists to access mental health services in England. In response, the Conservatives said they'd already increased training places for mental health nurses, while Labour said it would put mental health support in every school. In Teesside, the BBC Tees News website reports on Nigerian students seeking help from a food charity. An economic crash in Nigeria has left international students at Teesside University struggling to afford tuition fees, with some even blocked from their studies and ordered to return home. The manager of Thornaby's Sprouts Community Food Charity spoke to BBC Local Radio and said 75% of their clients were now the struggling students and that it was at maximum capacity. The university itself said it was providing support and that international applicants must provide evidence of sufficient funds when applying for a student visa. Nigeria is currently experiencing its worst economic crisis in a generation. The value of its currency has been depreciating by more than 200% against the dollar. As a result, students at many UK universities have seen savings wiped out and budgets having to be significantly reduced. Some students at Teesside University have complained that the university's decision to change the payment plan and reduce instalments from 7 to 3 have exacerbated issues. The university is offering case-by-case support to those affected. In Northern Ireland, the TES reports that Education Minister Paul Givan has warned schools they must make school uniforms more affordable and that a price cap is being considered. He said the cost of uniform was an unnecessary burden on families by branded clothing and uniforms being available from only one supplier. Mr. Givan said proposals due to go out for public consultation this spring will include strengthened guidance on the school uniforms. The decisions came in response to a motion in Stormont on making uniforms affordable. Mr. Given said school uniforms create a sense of belonging to a school community, but that they should also act to ensure that pupils of all backgrounds feel welcome in the school. He went on to say that while many schools had followed current guidance around value for money, there are other schools which have not, and that this is not a situation which I am going to permit to continue. Further details on the proposals, which could also include the price cap, can be found in TES magazine online. Holiday prices feature in a Schools Week article on criticism faced by holiday company Butlins after it was accused of undermining schools' work to boost attendance. The criticism came after the company advertised term time breaks as great value getaways. The firm offers a 4-night midweek term time break for just under £20 per person, much cheaper than rates during school holidays. Schools Week reporters posed as parents and asked if the holidays were suitable for school-aged children, and were told all breaks are suitable for all ages. Ministers have pushed all year for schools to improve their attendance rates as persistent absence rates are nearly double pre-pandemic levels. Several multi-academy trust chief executives have commented that marketing holidays which specifically target term time is not civic-minded, but understood the attraction for families struggling to afford a family break, who are being exploited by the companies. Full details of the story are available on Schools Week's website. Finally, aposiopesis was the final word spelled correctly by 12-year-old Bruat Soma to win the 2024 Scripps National Spelling Bee in the USA. Soma takes home a $50,000 prize after spelling 29 words in 90 seconds and getting them all correct. For those of you who are curious, aposiopesis is a term used for the device of suddenly breaking off in speech. An example of this rhetorical device could be, get out or else, with the threat remaining unsaid. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
Aposiopesis. Now, if that comes up in next year's SATS spelling test, frankly, I wouldn't be surprised. But also, can we just reflect for a moment there, Carla? I'm assuming you're back with us now, on the fact that Joe has just put in aposiopesis, which apparently means breaking off in speech, which seems to be a bit of a dig at us, frankly, just because of the connection issues that we've had tonight. How amazing is that? That's really, really apt. So yeah, well done to the young man on that spelling competition. That's for sure. It's all a little bit schools bashy, isn't it? Some of the news at the moment, and you know that's part of the problem as well. Before you joined, Cara, I was talking about the need for schools to be these kind of community hubs and places that bring communities together. And yeah, it's hard to do that when if you haven't got a government that kind of sees that as a fundamental function of schools and sees their responsibility to facilitate that with some of the discourse that goes on around schools as well. That was just a passing thought that I had. But before we lost you, we were talking about agency, and I know that one of the things we spoke about earlier was agency for schools as on an organisational level around curriculum, but some of the challenges that agency, particularly for primary schools, some of the challenges that agency also poses in terms of the links and connections to secondary school.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we spoke earlier and we talked about, the whole knowledge-based curriculum and who chooses that knowledge, who decides on that knowledge, and then how does that work in terms of fluency going up to secondary school? And whilst there should be that autonomy within schools to decide what is the best curriculum schema for their individual school, there is a sense that there needs to be an alignment around that would support then that transition. So yeah, I think it's a very interesting debate in the profession at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's something that's not going away either. That the idea that schools, primary schools, have got complete autonomy in some cases over what's taught in particular parts of the curriculum is brilliant in theory, but it just sort of feels slightly underdeveloped as an idea. Because, as you say, if you've got 4 different primary schools that are all teaching different history curriculums with different core concepts or different key concepts, at their heart. So, let's say that one school really, really wants to prioritise this concept of monarchy, and they beautifully threaded that concept all the way through their curriculum. But another school doesn't feel that is a kind of a priority concept for their children to grasp, and so they prioritise conflict, for example. And so those 2 schools have got year 6 children that go to year 7 with very well developed schemas around those particular concepts, but unfortunately they are different concepts. And then if a secondary school doesn't value either of those concepts, either monarchy or conflict, then what use is that knowledge going to be to them as they go on through secondary? Now, I'm sure there's lots of arguments that you could make to say that it is still super useful, and that actually the value of learning it is in and of itself, rather than just to prepare you for what comes next. But it certainly does feel like a little bit of a missed opportunity, and I think a lot of that goes back to one of the first points that we made right at the start of tonight's show, and something we spoke about at length earlier, was that an election cycle is 4 years, and often governments are driven by that cycle and by what can we achieve within these 4 years. And often what you get as a result of that are these underdeveloped ideas that actually over time aren't actually going to yield the fruit that we'd want them to. I said at the start of the show that from nursery up to leaving university is like an 18-year period, and so we need to have government that's thinking about decision making that is going to impact a generation of children young people before we can decide on whether that's had the impact that we wanted it to have.
Absolutely.
And so go on Carla, jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that the long-term agenda, the long-term plan is definitely a great need within education. As you said, I think that, it's far too much debated around the political cycle, and that doesn't give our young people that longevity that they need. And, I think that if we were to have that, then lots of different agencies, trusts, we could collaborate more effectively. I mean, going back to your point about the curriculum, really there's a simple solution to that, and that's about collaboration. That's about joining together locally with, schools, irrespective of what trusts they're in, irrespective of their local authority, and working and talking together to be able to form what is going to be a fluent curriculum. This is where obviously, all through schools, have more success. But on the other side to that, where also they bring in inequality, really, because you've got children that are going through that system that are having the advantage of that, and then other children that are coming from other primary schools that are not having the advantage of that. So I think, but the key for me is collaboration, us coming together and working.
Absolutely, collaboration is central, and I know that within your own trust, that's something that you've driven hugely since you've been in post over the last year. This idea of collaboration. And I see on social media regularly you're talking about collaboration, not competition, and that is such a powerful message, I think, to have. Just because, as I say, as I was talking about at the beginning of the show tonight, we have at the moment a system that seems to be moving towards incentivizing competition. So, the publication of exam results and declining roles and the big focus on maths, especially small maths, the kind of way that the government seems to be pushing smaller maths to expand and enlarge, which then creates a natural competition because all of the different trusts are going after the same schools that aren't currently in trusts, so that they can build up build up their own. And so it produces this kind of environment where people hang on to the expertise that they've got rather than risk sharing it and strengthening what unfortunately they can end up seeing as the opposition.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, we are in danger of having a very competitive education system in the future if things don't change in that respect. I mean, it's very different if you're a small trust or a larger trust. If you're a smaller trust, then, access to capital funding is different. So, that big drive to be above 3,000 pupils is a key indicator for smaller trusts. So, again, do you want to share and give away your sort of tips and tricks? You want schools to join you as opposed to another trust. And for me, that doesn't feel a very comfortable place to be in education. So I think that, removing that and bringing in collaboration where all of us are joining together our skill set and our expertise, because at the end of the day, this is about young people and shouldn't be about being in competition with each other.
Yeah, I mean, just for the listeners that maybe aren't aware, do you want to just expand on that 3,000 number? Why is that so important?
Well, we're a small trust at the moment. We're under 3,000, which means that from a capital point of view, for funding for premises and estate, we need to apply for SIF bids, conditional improvement funds. And at the moment, those are very hard to obtain. There's been obviously a lot of demands upon the government from a RAC point of view. So a lot of SIF bids have been denied this year. And that's where you get the funding to be able to make a difference in your schools, to make improvements to the environment within your schools. Whereas the money for a larger trust, the local authority schools, it goes directly to the local authority. So that's where it's a different scenario for small trusts, which does seem a little bit unfair and doesn't have that equitable nature to it.
And again, it's incentivising trusts to go out and grow fast. And again, that comes back to this kind of long-term versus short-term thinking as well. And if we've got that system whereby trusts are trying to grow really quickly, again, you have that kind of natural competition coming in. And we were talking earlier about some of the work that we do beyond in your case your trust, and in my case beyond my school, and we both feel quite passionately actually that there's very little point charging for that. Right, you're much better off to kind of go, right, I can give this to you. I really need some help with this over here. Have you got some expertise you can lend me? And almost by having this kind of expertise exchange, no one has to pay any money for anything. And so the money that we've actually got can go into supporting the pupils. Now, it's important to add there that we're certainly not trying to sort of devalue any of the anybody that's working for any kind of company that operates within education and makes their core money from, makes a living from selling those services to schools. They are absolutely, absolutely an asset to the sector in almost every case. But, as we were talking about earlier, if your mortgage is paid by the wages you get from your school, isn't it just better all round to kind of go, well, I've got this I can offer your school. If you've got something you can offer our school, let's do a swap and hey, no money has to change hands and everybody benefits.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's what education should be about. We try to engage our young people in our curriculum into thinking about being contributors to society and, giving back and playing a part in society. And I think that's a real key message that we need to give to our young people. And so why not model that? Why not have that as a model for us as an education agency? Like you said, there are people out there that obviously rely on those funds to pay their mortgage. They've got it as a company, as a business. That's absolutely appropriate, and no school minds buying into those services if they're relevant for that school. But if you're working in a school and you can share your expertise and do an exchange with that expertise, then I think it makes absolute perfect sense and can really help us in the educational world to be able to continue that improvement journey.
Absolutely, very well said indeed. Carla, do you want to? I think people are probably itching to hear your thoughts on Ofsted, because I gave a bit of a teaser earlier. I said that you've got an idea for what you would like the incoming government to do with the inspectorate. Do you want to just give us a bit of a flavour of what you think should be the priority for government in that respect?
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily. I'm not going to. It's not my idea. It's an idea. I think that the Labour Party are already pushing forward. I believe, but it's about a report card, basically. I mean, SIAMs. If you've got a Church of England school, SIAMs inspections have changed dramatically over the last couple of years, where you actually get a feedback of whether you've passed the criteria or not, as the case may be, and what recommendations they make to improve. And it feels a much more with you process, a much more nurturing process, a much more positive process. And I think that none of us in education mind having feedback, mind having reflection given to us. And I think that we do judge ourselves very harshly anyway. So I think that, we've got very high standards in education. So we welcome outside agencies, outside eyes coming into our establishments and giving us feedback. But I think by putting a single judgment onto it, it gives that intensity to it, and also can sometimes be very misinterpreted by parents, and just give that negative feel to it. So a report card that sort of highlights basically the strengths of your school, what you need to do as an urgent action or an immediate action, and then what you perhaps need to do as a long-term action to support continually improving at your school, I think will be a really positive step forward and make it feel that it was a process that's about improving and growing, as opposed to, negatively evaluating you.
I think that chimes really well with what school should be about. School should be about growing and developing and improving and learning, and it, that runs alongside that really well. I think one of the arguments against is that parents really like the one word judgments, and that they're really easy to digest and process. But I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that.
No,
because
there's lots of research out there, Adam, that has suggested that actually parents' feedback has stated otherwise, that parents actually have chosen sometimes required improvement schools over good and outstanding schools, because they've gone to those schools and they felt the atmosphere, they felt the culture, and they've really liked how the schools felt and what the head teacher, the leadership team have got to say. So I think there's lots of opposing views coming from parents about that, actually. I don't think that that argument stands very much anymore.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I'm a parent myself as well, and from my point of view, if I'm making a huge decision about where I send my child to school, I want to know as much about that school as possible. I want more than a word. I want to know, like you say, what that school needs to do immediately to improve, because that's what is going to be happening over the immediate term, but also what their kind of longer term aims are as well. I kind of want to be sold the vision of the education experience that my child's going to get, rather than a judgment at a point in time that actually reflects the deal that children were getting at that point in time. So at the moment, the system doesn't actually give us much of a window into what the future of that school might look like for prospective parents, whereas what you're describing absolutely would give us that. And I think it also ties in quite nicely to one of the other points that we wanted to get to tonight around assessment, and particularly assessment at the end of primary school. So at the moment, we've got this kind of point in time summative assessment that's made with the SATs, and we were talking earlier about actually how valuable is that, and why is it there, and is it there because the end of year 6, the end of key stage 2, there's a particular developmental reason why we have to have a summative judgment of children's competencies, for want of a better word, at that point? Or is it more of an arbitrary thing, which is really driven towards more around, well, they're geographically moving location, so it kind of makes sense that we would do some kind of summative assessment at this point, because they're going on to be taught by some new teachers that don't know them, and so we've got to give information to those teachers, so it makes sense that we give summative information to those secondary school teachers about what these children know and don't know. But actually, we're not giving that information. We're not passing on secondary schools with information about what our children at the end of year 6 know and what they don't know, and what they can do and what they can't do. We're giving this codified judgment of expected or greater depth. And so it's not particularly useful for that purpose either. So perhaps a similar kind of report card system that you're talking about for Ofsted and for schools as a whole, perhaps there's mileage in looking at something similar to that for the end of key stage 2.
I think when I've been a head teacher or a deputy head or involved in transition in any shape or form in my career, the most effective transition is always about that dialogue with the secondary school. And, where there's been really good dialogue, it's when the secondary school have really wanted to find out about that child in a more holistic view. And I've really said, the SATs is a very small part of what we need to know about this child. That's when you get effective transition. So I think that, I know what you're saying. We need to have that baseline. We need to have a benchmark. We need to make sure that we're tracking the progress of our young people. But I think that a 45-minute test isn't necessarily giving us the information that we really need. And there are lots of other ways that those things can be done. And also, I was contemplating, as I was saying to you earlier, that, during the SATs this year, as an example, I was talking to some of the heads, because there's such a process to actually getting the SATs sent to you, and then getting the SATs bagged up, and then getting the SATs sent away to a marker. And I was thinking about the cost of that, nationally, the cost of producing those SATs, sending them to schools, then sending them to a marker, getting them marked, getting them onto a system so as we can then receive those results. And, is that money best spent in that way to get what is sometimes a superficial judgment of where that child is at that point? Or is there another way, and is that money better affected in a different way being used in education?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are so many places where on the face of it you can look at and go, well, how would we fund that? But actually there's also a lot of other things where you think, well, if we didn't spend money on that, we'd have a bit more to spend on this. I think one of the other ideas that we spoke about earlier, and I touched on earlier on in the show tonight, was the idea of having schools as these community hubs, whereby there is mental health support and family well-being support that schools were essentially providing during COVID anyway, but you actually have that support for families and for the community formalised and running out of schools. Now, the rebuttal to that is, well, okay, how do you fund that? The answer is you're not actually funding anything new. You're just moving that service to the place where people are more likely to take it up. So at the moment, it sits within local authorities. If those services could sit within schools, you just move those people and move those services into schools, because that's where the parents are. That's where the parents are most likely to feel comfortable enough to come forward. It's where the parents are most likely to feel that they're being met halfway and supported and helped, rather than being sort of called out to a big local authority building or visited at home. So it's perhaps less threatening and more neutral to run it like that. So there's a clear benefit potentially. But again, as I say, I don't think that necessarily needs to mean that we've got to find new money to fund a new thing.
No, I think that, you're very right. I think during COVID, it proved that, schools became the heart of the community, the community hub. And I think that it is where parents feel more comfortable. It is the relationship with people at school is born and developed over a number of years. So it seems to me that an effective place for you to be able to have dialogue and put support in place for families, and reach out to other agencies that could be, surrounding that school to help and support. We've got a real disengaged system at the moment of, very separate social care, very separate schools, police are separate. And I know that, the in terms of police, they are struggling with recruitment as well and having the people to do all the jobs, etc. So, yeah, it would make sense to have a look at that and what could look different in order to have a more efficient way of working with supporting families.
Yeah, absolutely. There's like you say, there's so much mileage in just looking at that, and I think that's a big thing. I think for incoming government to not sort of close any doors straight away, and to kind of really look at kind of using some ingenuity to kind of come up with solutions to give us the situations that we're all kind of crying out for, and on the ground we kind of feel like these some of these things would make real sense. And actually, engaging with talking to people on the ground so that they can find out what that lived reality is, and therefore why some of these solutions are being suggested as they are.
I think that's an absolute key. It's a consultation. It's a discussion. I don't know what is the way forward with being able to get everybody's voice involved in, but I do think actually that there are a lot of people in education that I talk to on a daily basis that have really good solutions to some of our problems at the moment. Really good ideas, really creative ideas. And if the government can reach out and talk to the right people, the people on the ground, the people around the country in different areas with the different problems in different areas, then I think that there could be real simple solutions put in place. But I think that's the biggest barrier, is getting to talk to the right people and hearing the right voices.
Absolutely not easily done at all. Okay, we're going to go to our final break just to get some more messages from our friends and sponsors, and then we'll be back to wrap up. And I'm going to throw Carla a bit of a curveball and want to talk about something that we didn't discuss earlier in our plan. So let's see how we get on with that.
Empowering education with Easy for You, where innovation meets accessibility. Our subscription-based offering not only equips schools with cutting-edge devices, but revolutionises the learning experience by eliminating financial barriers, streamlining support, and embracing technology. We're not just providing tools, we're shaping a future where every student can thrive, unburdened by limitations. Easy for You. Transforming education, one device at a time. Find out more at www.easyforyou.school.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Reading Solutions UK. Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Join the free online International Reading Conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui, beloved children's author Michael Rosen, fluency expert Tim Rosinski, EEF specialist Chloe Butlin, the National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton, and a range of experienced practitioners, including MAT leaders, deputy heads, heads of English, high-level teaching assistants, and school librarians. Through the 3-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Visit Reading Solutions at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk for more information and to sign up for this free conference.
Okay, welcome back. So, Carla, the other point that I wanted to have a go at, if that's okay, is a thought that I was having, and I've spoken to a few people about this over the last couple of months, because it's something that I really truly believe in, is the connection, or at the moment lack thereof, between universities and schools. So universities are obviously the highest form of, or the highest place of education that we've got in our country, and so it makes sense to me that we should be connecting that with the schools that come lower down in the system, with even as low down as primary schools, to help teachers within those classrooms really connect with the research that's out there in a more impactful way. At the moment, we've got a system that absolutely allows teachers to connect with that research, but they need at the moment either leaders to go out and to be motivated, and to also be confident enough to go out and bring the right research back into school, and really know how to put that research into practice, driven by the unique context of the school. So it's about being research engaged but context led. or you go out and do it yourself. And it was something that I did early on in my career when my first ever job as a teacher after I qualified. I was, and I've said this before, I was a terrible teacher. Like, I really was bad. So much so, in fact, that, you know, the first school that I did my first term of my NQT year at the end of that first term, they were like, "Look, Adam, you know, I think you're a nice guy and all that, but we've got Ofsted coming and we're not sure we really want you hanging around when they get here." So I went and did supply for like a year and a half until I went back into a permanent position. And for that year and a half, and this is a habit that I've kept ever since, I read and researched and asked as many questions as I possibly could. But if I hadn't have had that motivation, I'm not sure that there's a system that facilitates someone like me getting better fast enough to have been able to stay in it. So connecting universities with schools is something that I personally feel is an untapped opportunity for us as a sector. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we as a trust have engaged in the MPQLT together, so learning as one. So I've got 101 teachers plus some learning support assistants completing the MPQLT at the moment. And they're finding it really, really useful, intriguing. There's obviously research attached to that. That would be an absolutely fantastic next step in order to be able to link up with local universities and continue that journey, that growth in understanding the science of learning. I think it'd be really useful. It would also be an opportunity to have a look at it, the appraisal system really suiting the fact that you can gain credits to sort of, you know, if you want to go on to complete masters and doctorates, etc., that you've got that avenue through your appraisal system to continue that higher level of research. So, and I think it also brings a little, it brings that element of respect and professionalism back to teaching. You know, it can be regarded as a high level profession, which I think sometimes the media miss. I think that they don't necessarily see it in that respect. And I think that bringing that element back would potentially give it more kudos in a sense.
Absolutely. And I think that's absolutely key as well. I mean, you know, it was something that we touched on earlier, and we were talking about teaching in Japan. Do you just want to remind me of what that fact was that you gave earlier?
Yeah, I was talking with somebody a couple of weeks ago, and they've been over and spent some time over in Japan, and they said that actually they see teachers and schools and education as nation builders. That's how they describe them. And I thought that was such an incredible term, because actually what you are doing is you're creating the next generation of adults within your education establishments day in and day out. Those are the people that are going to be the foundation of the next nation, you know, and so I felt that was just such a lovely way to describe the profession and gave it real substance. And I just really wish that we could bring that into our country, into the UK, and have that feeling that it's a really important profession. And schools are really important places. They are developing, you know, these young people into the next generation of adults. It needs to have that level of intensity around it.
Absolutely, and the level of value attached to it in terms of getting better at it as well. And I think that, you know, that ties in really nicely with what we were saying about trying to find a way that connects teachers to research easily and connects teachers to research in a way that is really accessible and digestible for them. You know,
the accessibility is a real crucial factor, isn't it? You know, teachers have a big role, a big job to do. How much time do they get to do that additional reading? And I think that's another part of, you know, what we need to figure out as leaders is how are we making sure that is a fundamental part of what we're building in to the work that we're doing with teachers. You know, our staff meetings, really utilising that time so that we're not making it an additional job for the teachers to do, but we're actually building it into the culture of how we work as a school, as a trust, etc. I mean, we've built in, you know, collaboration days next year, which are days where we're working together and sharing that expertise so that we're really building on it next year, you know, but that has to be something that's planned and really thought carefully about to ensure that it happens.
Absolutely, and you know, my school, we release every week for instructional coaching observations and also instructional coaching conversations to take place as well. And we've seen a real benefit of that just in terms of the kind of culture of improvement across the school. I do think though as well that there's a cultural shift that probably needs to take place across the whole profession as well. And some of that is also linked to I think the kind of engagement and the opportunity to make that link with universities is there. Adam Boxer on X the other day was saying that actually there's a responsibility on teachers to engage with professional development themselves as well, off their own backs as well. He was saying that I think it was his dad is a doctor, and every month he reads, or every week he reads the British Medical Journal, but also the journal of his specialism as well. And he does that, in his own time, just to keep up to date with developments that are going on. And I know lots and lots of people read education journals as well, and go and enjoy doing that research and that reading themselves. But I wonder if, to inspire more people to actually do that, and it goes back to your point earlier around, we've got to be the ones to spark the positivity. Can we spark positivity in teachers to actually go out and want to do a little bit more digging, a little bit more research, a little bit more reading? And is a way that we can spark that by involving universities more in the way that schools run, and the way that teaching is developed within schools. And if we can get people engaging on that level with universities and other institutions like that, are they then more likely to go off and run a little bit further themselves? I think they probably are. And I think if you get to that point, that's really kind of the holy grail of it almost.
I think fundamentally, most teachers that I've ever met have been learners. They want to continue to learn. We love learning. That's why we went into teaching. And I certainly have known that since we started the MPQLT Empower Trust, a lot of teachers have fed back to me. They're really enjoying, learning about different areas. Dual coding was one. And talking to other professionals about it, looking at how they can use it in the classroom, and really getting a lot from that professional dialogue. And it really has triggered and inspired them to want to go and read the impact journals at Chartered College. We pay for all of our heads to be members of Chartered College, and so that they can keep up to date with that latest research and information. We use EEF, and some of our schools are involved in pilots, and I think there is a crave to do that within the profession. I think the fundamental barrier to it is often the perception of workload, and I think that's what we do as leaders is to look at that workload and give it the accessibility that it needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it comes back to that thing of, right, can we prioritize the right things, not just operationally, but culturally? How do we as leaders make sure that we're sending a message to people that this is something that we value? Your professional development, you getting better at teaching, not because you're not good enough, but just because, hey, why not get better at it? Because if you do, you're going to get greater purpose and greater meaning from your job. How do we facilitate that culturally as leaders? And then from that government perspective, how does the government set the climate so that it's right and ready for leaders to be able to do that? How do we kind of remove a little bit of the kind of judgment culture that we've got around schools, so that leaders aren't feeling the pressure to kind of push that down, and that actually we can focus more on development? And I think that your point about the Ofsted report card is a great one. If at government level we're going, it's about development, it's about growth, then it's much easier then for school leaders to go to their teachers, it's about development, it's about growth, it's not about judgment. So yeah, absolutely fantastic stuff.
Yeah. I think that mentality, that mindset is a key part to moving the profession forward. Absolutely.
So, Carla, just to wrap up then, I'm just going to read out our manifesto for an incoming government then. So we've got the kind of the overall aim of changing the profile of education. We want it to be the pinnacle. We want it to be a sought after profession. We want it to be something that's respected, and we want teachers to think of themselves and think of each other as nation builders. We've talked about, we need trusts and schools to work together to form fluent curriculums from primary to secondary, so that we don't have these kind of inequalities of provision and a lot of wasted, high quality but wasted work in primary, because secondary schools don't understand in quite the same way what it is the primaries have done and all of that kind of thing. So working together to create these fluent curriculums. We want to make sure that we create a climate whereby agency is absolutely prioritised, because if we give agency to teachers, we're going to develop meaning and purpose, and if we develop meaning and purpose, we're going to keep them in the profession for longer. And if we keep them in profession for longer, it means that they're going to be more well equipped to develop the next generation of teachers coming through. And that agency is all about getting our models of coaching and mentoring absolutely right, so that we are encouraging teachers to think and giving them the framework within which to think, as well as the strategies to think with, and not just going straight to the strategy. And we want schools to become hubs for the community, and we're thinking that we could potentially fund that by simply moving where these current services are currently housed and moving them over to schools, so that schools can become hubs for the community with things like emotional family wellbeing support and mental health and emotional support could run out of schools, as we did so successfully during COVID. And we were wrapping all that up with this Ofsted report card, which is going to set the tone for all of this around being about development and growth, and removing that kind of fear and feeling of judgment that currently exists across our profession. How does that sound? Would you vote for that?
I definitely vote for that, Adam. I think that you need to just package that straight down to Downing Street and get Starmer and Sunak to have a little read through, and yeah, we'll hopefully then on the 4th of July get what we need and we'll be able to move forward. But yeah, I think it's not rocket science either, is it? I'm sure that there's lots of people that will listen and think, yeah, those are pretty straightforward. We all think the same. It's not rocket science. There's solutions out there, but it takes that collaboration and that joined up thinking, doesn't it? And that long-term plan.
It certainly does. Carla, I've had a wonderful time talking to you this evening. I'm sure people have had an incredible time listening, and those listening on the podcast as well will equally share those thoughts. Thank you so much for your time and your contributions. And I know we had a few technical issues to start with, so maybe we can kind of get you back on another time to talk about something else and take a little bit more value from your time as well. How would that sound?
That sounds great. Thank you, Adam. I apologise for my connectivity. It's living in Shropshire in a rural area. I apologise now.
I look forward to visiting sometime. Thanks, Carla.
You're welcome. See you later.
See you. So thanks very much indeed, ladies and gents, for listening along to that. Next up on Teachers Talk Radio, we've got the Late Show with Ray, who is on at 9:00 with Dan Santangelo. So do stick around and listen into that show. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's show with me, Adam Kohlbeck, the Twilight Show, and my guest, Carla Whelan. And hopefully you'll join us again next week when we'll have another guest, another topic, and we'll delve into all things education in another different way.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.